in the law of contract is a consideration, right? So this 4th slide that I created is not in the teaching note that Nanyang gave you, because that one never explained about the meaning of consideration, contract consideration. They only zoom into the so-called the case study, right? So case study, I will elaborate a little bit. Those is essential. Those I think you can understand. Those that is more deeper, we don't want to delve into it, right? So the first PowerPoint slide is explaining the meaning of consideration. Okay. So let's wait another 2 minutes. If they don't come, I will start. Oh, now we have 9 minus me, 7 of you. Okay. So yesterday was 15, today 7. Oh, cannot wake up early. 10. Okay, guys. Good morning to all of you. Right? Can you hear me?
Yeah, hear me.
Can you hear? Okay, now we will start the lesson. Oh. Okay, the first explanation is the contract law consideration. What it mean by consideration, I will read through and explain to you, right? So consideration is an important element or essential element to the creation of valid contract. And the consideration must be of some value that can be objectively determined. Consideration is often defined as a benefit or detriment, right? Whether it's good or bad, you need to consider before you sign the contract, before you decide the contract. So a person will be found to have provided consideration if he can show that he has conferred the benefit of the other party in return for the party promises, and he has incurred a detriment for which the party promise was intended to compensate. All right. So that means to say, okay, a consideration is both parties have to consider the content of the contract. The contract written there, whether it's benefit you or not benefit you, then there is a detrimental to your company or to yourself. You have to consider properly. After you give the consideration, that means, okay, I agree with the contract. And that will be in the essence of both party agreement. All right. There's a promise for both parties. So that can consider a consideration, right? So as you can see here is consideration in contract refer to the benefit of each party in exchange for what is given up in the contract. In a vital element in the contract, in order to make it legally binding. That means contract, both parties agree upon and sign a contract, whether in oral or writing, become invalid is there's no consideration. That means to say, you force people to sign a contract. That is not a contract. That is a forced contract that is detrimental to the other party, which he never considered about the content of the contract. So in contract agreement, okay, when you tender a job, so after tender, the price, everything, the owner, okay, give you the contract. So the contract, if you haven't read properly, okay, you openly tell the owner side, okay, I agree. But by the time, if you do the job, then it's not beneficial to the company. Then you complain to the owner, hey, this contract is no good, man. I lost a lot of money. Okay? But the owner will tell the contractor, like, I give you the contract, that I give you due duration to read through. That means I have enough time given to you to consider the contract. But if you're not reading it, it's not the owner business. Like, use yourself at fault. That means to say, you create a so-called a detriment to your company profitability. Okay, so please consider, if you next time you manage a contract, the contract given to you by the owner or by another party, you make sure that the contract are acceptable to you by reading and understanding. All right. Contract is a legal means. Anything they go through with you to sue you, they will based on the evidence stated in the contract. All right. So you must give a good consideration before you can accept. Okay. Next one, essential element of consideration is in order to form a valid contract. Consideration must meet the following condition. It must be something worth bargaining for. Let's say the owner give you the contract. You are the contractor. So he give you the contract, you read, must be something worth. That means you must make money. You must provide, the contract will provide job for your people, etc. It must benefit all parties. All right. That means the contract given, it benefit the owner, at the same time you by making profit. But the owner can get the job he want, and you finish the job, he is very happy. It must be of some value. So after doing the job, the building maybe increase in value. But for your company, your turnover, your profitability will increase. So these are the essential consideration before you can sign the contract. All right. So by and large, any contractor or the other party, they must agree that this contract agreement, both parties must have the benefit. Otherwise, you no need to sign. Oh. Okay, there are two types of consideration. Okay, one is a bilateral contract involving exchange a promise for a promise. Another one is unilateral contract involve one party making a promise and the other party doing something in return. Okay, let's see how the definition is talked about. Okay. So for unilateral contract by definition is a contract involve action taken by one group or one person alone. In contract law, for a contract to be unilateral, it can only allow for one person to make the agreement. So the promise the one party make will be considered available and open until someone take action. The promise will be then fulfilled once a person have acted on it. That means once the person signed the contract. That means you are the GM, you are the CEO of the company, you act on behalf of the company. You, one person, can decide, right, to sign the contract. So what it means by unilateral agreement is here. Okay, it's an open-end agreement. Open-end means subject to changes, subject to the term and condition of the contract. Either party can change before you accept, right? That require acceptance to start. Okay, where a bilateral contract is a contract where both sides have promises. Okay, let's look at this bilateral contract. If either party fail to perform their end of the agreement, the non-performing party will be considered a breach of contract. In essence, bilateral contract is constructed of a promise in exchange of a promise. That means to say both of you sign the contract, the owner and the contractor both must agree, and either party not performing well to the expectation of the owner, then the owner deserves the right to sue the contractor. Either party, right? If the owner don't pay the money after you perform the job, you as a contractor, you can sue the owner themselves, sue the owner also. So if both parties concerned, not only one party, right? So here, I further emphasize on bilateral contract and what does it mean, all right? So a contract is entered at least two group of people where both parties in contract will make the promises. Okay, the element in bilateral contract are similar to those unilateral, such as promisor offer, promisor acceptance, okay, consideration of what can support the offer, and legal capacity of both. That means once you agree, both parties will agree to the term and conditions set out in the contract. Okay. So there are a number of things the party can agree: the time frame, the description of product, what happened if either party fail. No, there's certain breach that the company can sue either party if the contract never fulfill the requirement. What constitutes a breach of contract, you can explain in the contract, you can write down in the contract, and that will be taken into action if the job cannot finish on time, on target. Okay? So with this in mind, we will go to the case study, right? Let me go through the case study. Okay. In today's study, we will talk about consideration, which I explained. The first one is more on the theoretical part, but here is the case study. I only select a case study that is easy to understand, all right? So doctrine of consideration. Here they tell you the essential thing that the consideration to work should be considered, all right? Here, White versus Bluiett, okay, 1853. You and me was not born yet, all right? Health, the son promised too vague and would not constitute a valid consideration. That means there's no agreement. That means to say here, it tells you something. So when you have signed a contract, your contract cannot be vague. That means contract is not expressed in clear term, in clear so-called English. All right. And people read it, they don't understand. But maybe that the guy is hard up for a job, right? For finding a job, he don't mind sign. But after sign already, the consideration is not complete. He don't understand, but he have a right to counter sue them later on. All right, based on this case of White versus Bluiett. All right. So to doctrine of consideration, to give an agreement a badge of enforceability. That means your agreement must be written properly. Both parties agree, then you sign. In Singapore, some contractors are like that because some of the contractors in Singapore, they are old people. Some of them are not educated. So here you know that legal requirement, the contract all written in English. So those people that is Chinese educated or not so educated, they're a bit confused. Then they see the contract, oh, got money, okay lah, sign lah. Because the job will give him certain income for his people and himself. So he signed. But when it comes to execution the job, the client demand this, demand that, that is not written very clearly, and it written in a vague form, the contractor don't understand. So he have a right to reject the contract later on if he finds too much eat into his profit and his financial situation. So this allows a court a legal reason to enforce, right? So that means to say when you sign a contract, there must be correct term and condition according to what you expect, and the client are happy with the contract that both of you agree. Then can consider a so-called legal contract, right? Okay, definition, I already told you already. Okay. So here is more, what they call, more in-depth, right? Here he say that a valuable consideration in the eye of the law may consist of either some right, interest, benefit, or profit accruing to one party, or some forbearance, detriment, loss, or responsibility given, suffer, and undertaken. All right. So the contract should be fair to both parties within the schedule, within the cost, okay, within the capability. All right. So if anything that you suffer, like in here is stated, okay, detrimental loss will be subjected to validation or adjudication or sue in court, right? Take note. So consideration is the detriment incurred by the promisee, okay, or the benefit given to the promiser in return for promiser's promise, okay? Take note. Professor, this one I don't want to talk, this one, okay? So rule of consideration, past consideration is not a good consideration. Consideration must move from promisee, okay? That means the offeree, okay? I'm the owner, I offer this job, you accept, okay? But before signing, you have to consider, and after that you say, okay lah, I sign. Then end up, at the end, the promisee have suffered a loss, okay? Consideration must be sufficient, but need not to be adequate, but sufficiently for him to understand the contractors or whoever signed the promisee, all right? Take note. So all these things will be judged and argued in the eye of the law, okay? So when you come into these clashes with your owner side, with the owner side, you have to incur a lot of legal costs to your suing and make sure that you win the case. If you don't win the case, you better don't sue, okay? A promise which is made after an act have been performed is generally not enforceable. Okay, you think about this case, okay? All right, that means to say you agree to do job, but contract haven't signed, okay? And you want to claim the money from the client. The client has the right not to pay you, okay? So contract law is very clear about all these things. Everything you must show evidence that the contract is valid, that the contract is signed by both parties, that the amount that you agree is written black and white, okay? Past consideration, court look at sequence of event and not at the wording used in the contract, right? So when you have a contract, you said the owner give you this contract, okay, you must do this, do this, do that. So they look at the event, whether you actually execute the job and be confirmed by the owner representative that the job is carried out and performed according to the specification that both parties agree. All right. So this is what the statement is. Okay. Consideration of carrying out certain alteration and improvement to the house, we hereby agree to pay you. Right. And this is a fact. Like for example, in construction, normally the owner will ask the professional engineer or QS, quantity surveying, to survey the improvement of the job, then inform the owner. The owner will, according to the percentage of job completion, okay, and they will pay the contractors. Work by themselves do not make consideration valid. It is passed. That means to say, by word, the contractor say, oh, I done this, done that. But no, always must be validated by the appointed surveyor, quantity surveyor, or the professional engineer that survey the place, whether this job is being complete based on the schedule, based on the contract obligation. Okay. So again, this is a facts. Okay. Guardian of young girl raised a loan to educate the girl and to improve her marriage prospect. After her marriage, the husband promised to pay off the loan. The guardian consideration was passed. Although husband have a moral obligation, it is not legally enforceable. Right? That means to say, I take a loan for myself, I have to pay. Even though the girl married to the husband, in terms of moral obligation, yes, the husband need to help her to pay. Help only, it's not a requirement under the law. Okay? Take note of that. So exception to the rule is previous request, business situation, and Bill of Exchange Act, statutory intervention. That means the law forbid you to do this, but your contract signed like that, then it's okay. So under the law, this is what they require. All right. In terms of business situation, you cannot perform because your people resign, your budget no more, all this, right? So all these things will take into consideration if you are the owner, want to sue the subcon or the contractor, you know that the business situation of their company is like that. Most of the time, the owner or the contractor will declare bankrupt. Then you cannot get anything from him. Okay. Doctrine or imply assumption or assumption. Okay. Facts here is Bradwick kill someone, then ask L to get him a pardon. L got him the pardon and give it to B, who promised to pay L, okay, for his trouble. Although L consideration was passed, B promised to pay could be linked to the earlier request. So this case, whether L got paid, okay. So as he say here, the request that there is an implied assumption, okay. An implied assumption, if both parties agree, then B will be paid accordingly. Okay. Okay. When the act of promises are performed at the request of promiser, subsequent to the promise of the act by promisee and the promiser promise to pay for it, then such promise may be enforceable. Okay. Okay, this is another case. Okay, I don't want to talk about, we have too many of these cases already. Business situation, there's another case. Okay, if something is done in a business context, it is clearly understood by both parties, it will be paid for, then past consideration will be still valid. All right. So KC patent, right? A and B own a patent that KC, a manager work on it. A and B promise C, a third party in the invention, the third share in the invention. Health. C could rely on the agreement and promise as consideration was done in the business situation. Then the request of A and B, it was understood by C, will be paid, right? At the request of A and B, it was understood by both parties, C will be paid. Okay, as long agree upon verbal agreement, okay, under the law, contract law, verbal agreement also consider agreement. Okay. Bill of Exchange Act, an antecedent previous debt or liability is valid for bill of exchange. Okay, an unconditional order in writing requiring person to pay a sum of money to a specific person or to bearer, right? So this is the act, and this one is all focused on the UK law. It's not Singapore law, right? So actually we don't need to know this, right? A written acknowledgement of debt by the debtor should be deemed to have accrued on and not before. All right. That means long time ago you agree upon this is the price and all these things, then you owe me this much. Not before the date of acknowledgement. Then before the date you want to sue him, then he ask him to come up with the so-called the debt written statement. Okay. Okay, consideration must move from the promisee. Okay, what I say here is more on the promisee, that you promise to pay. Okay, the promisee is allowed to pay. So here the fact is, Ethan make a contract with X, and that in return for X doing work for him. Okay, Ethan will pay the price. X did not work, but Ethan did not pay. So price is suing. So hell is price claim must fail as he had not provided the consideration. The maxim is a person to whom a promise is made can only enforce the promise if he himself the consideration for that promises. Okay, that means he said this is the unilateral consideration. He promised himself, promised to the client, end of the day, you never do a job, you cannot claim. Okay. On the other hand, the owner can claim him for the failure of performing the job. Okay. Okay. Consideration can move from promises to third party at the request of the promiser. Okay. Under this consideration, that can be done also. So here it is. Record obtained for 3 chocolate wrapper. Value of the wrapper is irrelevant. If it was made as consideration, is sufficient enough. Alright. Okay, then 3 party already we agree upon, like they consider this factor, this good enough to bring up the case. Okay, husband. Mainland Bank versus Green. Husband convey an estate to his wife at a very low price to avoid the operation of an option to purchase. Hell, adequacy is not enough. Not relevant. Okay? It means to say the husband is wrong. They never follow the market price. So not adequate enough to justify. Okay? Thomas versus Thomas. Mrs. Thomas was allowed to stay in her husband's house. The husband house which show. And secondly, for a promise that he will pay $1 per year. But the $1, £1 per year was the consideration. But not the husband wish. Another word is saying that she only pay $1, £1 per year. Whether the husband agree or not, she still pay the the money of $1, £1 per year. Okay, but the husband doesn't agree. Okay. So no consideration, some situation is performance of existing public duty, okay, government side. Performance of existing contractor duty. Okay, performance of existing contractor duty owed to the third party. An act of forbearance, right? So these are all non-consideration because all the contract already signed. Everything is all black and white. You can't run away. Okay, public duty, as you know, a promise to perform a duty already imposed by the law does not constitute a good consideration, as is everywhere is practiced the same way. Okay, so I don't want to talk about this. Government, we follow the government rules and contract. You cannot run away. Okay. Okay, for example, like this one, exception to public duty, not valid consideration. Two, police doing duty beyond their public duty, held for sufficient consideration. For example, Glassbrook Brother and Bromogan County, promises derive a practical benefit if a party to an existing contract agree to pay the extra bonus in order to ensure the other party performs its obligation under the contract, then the agreement is binding. If the party agreeing to pay the bonus have obtained some practical advantage or avoid disadvantage, then this one will not fulfill. Okay, that means to say the payment, the consideration must be both party benefit. Okay. Okay, performance of existing contract duty, contractual duty, Harley and Osanbil by facts, similar fact, except that the ship was seriously undermanned. The rest of the journey had become extremely hazardous. Now is sailing the ship back on such condition was over and above contracted duty. True. But if you look at this situation, like for example, work in construction site, some engineer, worker, or supervisor, they sometimes work more than 12 hours per day, right? And they are subject to dangerous condition. That means they work because of their long hour, they become very tired and fatigued. Okay, and the hazard become very extreme. Okay, the risk is very high of getting an accident. So by these two definitions, the worker, engineer can refuse not to work, right, under the law. But the employer keep on insisting that they must do the job, right? So the employee have a right to complain or to take up a suit against the employer for excessive work and cause fatigue and cause dangerous to the worker. Okay, under the law, the employer have to pay. Okay. Okay, same this case, I want to talk about it. Okay, how come got noise? Hello. Okay, next one will be Stocks and Facts. Okay, Facts as contracted to deliver coal to X, or rather to X order. Okay, X sold the coal to Bet in order to deliver the coal to Bet. Then Bet promised Stocks with his S that he would unload it at a fixed rate. In an action by Scott to enforce that promise, Bet argued that the promise was not binding because Scotland had not provided the consideration. So Scotland delivery of coal, the performance of existing contract to the third party was a benefit plus valid consideration. Right. So there is a third party involved, but there is a verbal contract, right? So the party will win the case, right? So forbearance is one person that had valid claim against another in contract or tort. But he promised to forbear from enforcing it. That will constitute a valid consideration if made in return for a promise by others to settle. That means to say, whatever we agree upon, maybe come to the end of payment, I don't pay you, okay. But what happened to the other party that claimed to this party, then in return, the three parties have to be agreed upon to settle the claim, right? And this is an act of forbearance. Okay, you can give up, but other people claim you can bring up the case again. Okay. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir.
The sound, please keep quiet. Can you ask that guy to move away from the working condition?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, part payment of debt. Penal case, a promise to accept a payment, to accept part payment of the debt is in discharge of the entire debt is not a valid consideration. Okay, that means to say your company own people money, then you tell them I pay only 10%, then you forget about everything. That is not the right way. Provided the other party agree with a written facts and evidence that they accept this so-called discount debt payment, right? But nobody in this world will do like that. Unless you go into court, declare bankrupt, then the court will decide, okay, this company owe you 500, he only will pay you 100. That means you lost 80% of the debt. That will be decided by the court, not by yourself and the contractors, right? Okay. So you can see here, if A owed B a debt of 200, B agreed to accept 100 in full satisfaction of the debt, right? B is not bound by his promise. He may subsequently sue for full payment, provided that A company make profit later on, the company revive back, right? So if not, then you cannot sue the return of the debt further, all right? So like this type of thing, it happened in Singapore also. Under the law, when you in debt, when company close down in debt, then you have to pay only certain percentage, right? But if one-to-one debt, that means to say you own the loan shark, you also need to negotiate and return in a contract before you pay out. Okay, take note. Okay, facts. Coal owned Penal $8.50 pound, which is due on November 11. At Penal request, Coal paid okay, £5.11 on the 1st October, where Penel accepted the full payment of the debt. Okay, Penel sued Co for the amount owed. Okay, part payment itself not a consideration. I mean, what you say here is whatever Co pay on 1st of October, okay, he still, legally speaking, had to pay him the full amount. Okay, that is not a consideration. Okay, payment of a lesser sum, principal, on the day cannot be any satisfaction for the whole, because it appeared to the judges that by no possibility of lesser sum can be satisfied to the claimant of a greater sum. All right. So in the law, the judge will say that, okay, you have to pay 100%, not lesser amount, unless you have solid ground to prove that you are unable to pay. Even unable to pay, you still owe him. All right. Take note. Okay, exception for the general rule of the payment of debt. Okay, if creditor accept part payment on the earlier date than the due date. Okay, that will agree. That means you owe them, you negotiate before the actual date of paying. If the creditor accept chattel instead of money or other gift, also can. If the creditor accept part in different place at the request at part payment in a different place at the creditor request to that original specified. All right. So all these things must be in black and white, written properly. Delay payment, all these things must be agreed upon before the owner pay or the loser pay. So everything is black and white. Put it this way. Okay. So I don't want to discuss about this anymore. Okay. The two exceptional situations when a creditor cannot go back on his promise, even though consideration is absent. I mean, they never agree anything but part payment of the debt by a third party. That means you cannot go through a third party because you deal with second party, you cannot do. Composition agreement with the creditor. All right, take note. Okay, this one I already discussed. I want to talk about. Okay. Here, for example, defendant owe the claimant. The claimant accepted £9 from the defendant father in full satisfaction. The claimant then sued the defendant. The claimant failed because by suing his son, he was committing a fraud on the father. Yes. I mean, he get double payment. It's not right. Okay. Okay, composition agreement with creditor. A debtor who cannot pay his creditor in full may agree his creditor to pay each of them dividend and thus lesser sum. If they agree, they then cannot sue the debtor as it will be a fault on the other creditor. Okay? That means to say the debtor used in other way of paying, like for example, dividend, share, option, all these things. Once they agree upon, they sign already, they cannot ask for further than that. Okay, and that share or dividend paid to him will be calculated based on the creditor's sum of money. Okay, another one is promissory, that means the agreement. All right, estoppel. Okay, held here. Lord Denning, by his ratio, held that the claimant was entitled to sue as the rent deduction was only meant to apply to a period of war. Obiter mentioned that the claimant would have been a stop in equity if they had made the claim during the war. Right. Estoppel. is a rule where a person is prevented from denying the existing fact which he himself had previously asserted. Okay, the promiser will be stopped from denying the existing of such promises and will not be allowed to act inconsistently from any such assertion he may have made as to his future conduct. Okay, all these are facts and evidence you can't escape. All right. So here is another example. Promise small sum of discharge of larger sum, be acted upon binding, notwithstanding the absence of consideration. Okay, there is no consideration, they agree, okay, and when you, this binding for the small sum that they pay, and the creditor or rather the owner or rather the creditor will not take from them anymore once there is no consideration. Payment of debt, requirement that must be met before doctrine of promissory estoppel may be applied. There must be clear, unambiguous statement by the promiser that his strict legal right will not be enforced. The promisee must have acted in reliance on the promise. It must be inequitable for the promiser to back his promise. Okay, all these things must be fulfilled before the promissory estoppel apply, right? Statement, the legal right will not be enforced. There must be clear and unambiguous statement by the promiser that his strict legal requirement will not be enforced. Or this one must be agreed upon before you can decide on payment structure or whatever, right? Take for instance this Hewers and Metropolitan Railway. Okay. Promiser have acted on reliance on the promise. The promisee may have changed his position to detriment, meaning put in worse position if the promise is revoked. Okay. Or alter his position in some way. Right. So what will be the outcome? Okay, inequitable for promiser to go back on promise. That means to say, promiser can only recite for his promise, or rather withdraw from his promises if it is equitable. That means the word equitable, everything done must be fair. All right, and equitable to both parties. Okay. Okay, doctrine of promissory estoppel is a shield, not a sword. Does not allow new cause of action where no cause of action existed. All right. That means to say, it's sort of an agreement at that juncture, the debt we pay only 20%, and the promiser agree, no? Then end up you have no case already. So in this Combi versus Combi, okay, the judge held that the wife gave no consideration for the husband's promise. Therefore, he could not be succeed. Okay. So doctrine suspend or extinguish the right of promiser. For example, this company, right? Creditor may resume strict right on the given notice that they wish to be paid in full, and then allowing a reasonable time for the debtor to comply. So, principle does not extinguish obligation. In the first instance, you own people, there is a principle to pay, but maybe in time, like the time may be 3 months, change to 5 months, still okay. But the principle does not change. The money that you own does not change. Okay? Any question? Hello?
No question, sir.
Okay, can I have a show of face? I take photo, please. Yeah, show your face. Okay, thank you. Wait, I take photos. Okay, smile. Okay, that's it. Wow, all same face. Good. Oh, more and more students. I want to do in class rather than Zoom. Zoom very tired. Class more interesting because there is a so-called human interface. Then I can ask you or your opinion, can talk to you, all these things. More relevant, more so-called benefit to you and to me. Right now, I only talk, you never answer. This is no fun. Every day I do the talking. I'm very tired. But this is the school policy I have to follow if I want to earn the money. Correct. So no other question. Shall we end? Hello? Can? Hello?
Can.
Okay, I stop the slide.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, sir.
Goodbye to all of you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, sir.
Bye.